Leo Tolstoy. The One Commandment. God is love. First John 4:16. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. First John 4:12. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Matthew 22:36-40. First, the gospel teaches a simple faith, faith in God and reverence for him, which is the same as obedience to his law, and his whole law is contained in one thing alone, to love one's neighbor. Spinoza. The Christian faith is wholly about love. We all know this. We know it not only because it is written in the gospel, but because it is written in our souls. Speak of love to anyone at all, to a Russian, a German, a Chinese, a Japanese, a Hindu. Speak of it to a thief, a robber, an executioner. And there is no one who would deny that it is better for human beings to live by love than to live as they do now. More than that, everyone knows not only that it is better to live by love than by enmity and hatred, but that it is possible to live in that way. Why then do we Christians, not to speak of people of other faiths, but we Christians who know, as all people know, that it is good and possible to live in love, and who know this also from the gospel, which we call a holy book, why do we live not by love, but by enmity and hatred? Why is that? Because both in the gospel and in our own souls we have been given one faith alone, the faith of love, and one commandment alone, the commandment of love. Yet besides this faith in love, we believe in many other things, and besides this commandment of love, we treat many other commandments as divine. And so in life, we follow those other commandments more than the commandment of love that has been given to us in our hearts and in Christian teaching. 2. From the moment when the first members of the councils said, "It seemed good to us and to the Holy Spirit," that is, when they raised external authority above inner authority, and declared the miserable products of human reasoning at councils to be holier and more important than the one thing truly holy in a human being, reason and conscience. From that moment began the lie that lulls human souls, the lie that has destroyed millions of lives and still carries on its terrible work. We give most people too much credit when we say that they profess one religion or another. They neither know nor seek any religion. By that word, they mean only the established doctrine of the Church. And the so-called religious wars that have so often shaken the world and drenched it in blood were never anything but quarrels over church doctrine. What the oppressed complained of, in essence, was not that they were prevented from belonging to their religion, for no external force can do that, but that they were not allowed to profess their church faith openly. Kant. The master showed the workers their task and told them to do that task alone, promising them a good life in return. But some of the workers decided to secure a good life for themselves, not by doing the work itself, but by pleasing the master in other ways. They invented many such ways of pleasing him and busied themselves with them, while the work the master had shown them they did only when they felt like it, or did not do at all. More than that, some workers, seeing that the master could hardly need all the empty things they had been taught to do in order to please him, began to doubt whether the master needed anything from them at all, and they stopped doing even the work he had assigned. Others went further and decided there was no master at all, and that one could live and work only for oneself. And the lives of such workers became wretched and miserable. This is exactly what happened to people who, besides faith in love, established various other beliefs and called them divine. Belief in the Trinity, in the divinity of Christ, in his atonement for the sins of humankind, in the Mother of God, in saints, miracle workers, and much else besides, and various commandments which they also called divine, commandments about baptism, confession, communion, marriage, attendance at church, the keeping of fasts, and many others, by which they hope both to arrange a good life for themselves and to please God. What happened was this. Most of those who accepted these beliefs and commandments say only with their lips that they believe in them. In their hearts, they believe neither in them nor in the commandment of love lost among them. And of all the commandments they keep only those that are easiest and most approved by other people. They acknowledge the commandment of love in words, but in deed, at every step, they do what is directly opposed to it. Instead of sharing with one another in love, the rich live in luxury among the hungry poor worn down by labor, while the poor hate the rich and try to do them harm. Instead of loving and forgiving their brothers, people torment one another, ruin one another, exile one another, imprison one another, execute one another, and kill one another by the hundreds and thousands in war. And that is not all. Many good and intelligent people, brought up to believe that God can be pleased by various doctrines and commandments handed down from person to person, come in time to see that all this is mere human invention. They cease to believe in church doctrines and church commandments, and along with them they cease to believe in the commandment of love. There are now more and more people who believe not only in no divine commandments, but not even in God himself. And so, in our time, there are more and more who believe in nothing, do not think about why they came into God's world, and do not know what they are to do in it. They simply live until they die, doing whatever comes into their heads. That is why human life has become so bad, and with every year, every month, every day, it grows worse. And life is bad because people live against that one commandment which is written not only in the Gospel, but in the teachings of all the sages of the world, among the Hindus, the Chinese, the Egyptians, the Muslims, and others, and also in the souls of all people. People live against that faith and that commandment, which are written in all teachings and in all human souls, because instead of recognizing this one commandment and following it alone, they have set up many other beliefs and commandments beside it, and follow those more than the one universal commandment of love. 3. The sage said, "My teaching is simple, and its meaning is easy to grasp. It consists entirely of loving one's neighbor as oneself." Chinese wisdom. One of the scribes, hearing their debate and seeing that Jesus had answered them well, came up and asked him, "Which is the first of all the commandments?" Jesus answered him, "The first of all the commandments is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Mark 12:28-31. But even if we agree that there is only one true faith, the faith of love, and only one necessary commandment, the commandment of love, then what will faith consist in? What will worship be? What prayers will there be, and how shall we commune with God? People will ask. When you believe in the ordinary established faith, you know who your God is, by whom all things were created, to whom you should pray, and from whom you may expect mercy. But if you believe only in love, then there is no real God and no worship. And without a God people can understand, and without worship people have never lived and cannot live. That is what people will say when, instead of a God they can understand and to whom they can pray and serve, they are given only some vague belief in love. That is what they will say, and indeed, that is what people are saying. And they are entirely right in this much. People have never lived and cannot live without some clear object of faith that is intelligible to the majority, and without a form of worship flowing from that faith that is likewise plain and accessible to the majority. They are wrong only in supposing that love is not clear enough to serve as such an object of faith, and that the life flowing from this faith is not clear enough to serve as such a form of worship. They think this only because they have grown used to imagining the chief object of faith as an anthropomorphic, eternal, omnipotent being, a creator and providence, who reveals his will to people by supernatural means. And they have grown used to a form of worship precisely defined in time, place, and outward form, requiring specific external acts at specific times. For that reason, a single faith in love, which has no visible image, and the worship that arises from it, which is likewise not bound to form, time, or place, seems to them vague, inaccessible to the majority, and even doubtful. And yet the single faith in love and the worship that flows from it are not less definite, clear, and accessible to ordinary people than the humanly invented faiths with their many objects of belief and commandments. Indeed, they have one great advantage over them. Whereas all the conflicting beliefs and forms of worship that condemn one another drive people into hatred, murder, and war, only the one faith in love and the worship that flows from it do what religion promises to do. They unite all people in one faith and one worship. 4. As long as a person lives, he believes. The closer his faith is to the truth, the happier his life. The further from the truth, the more miserable the person. One can believe only in what undoubtedly exists, but which we cannot grasp with our minds. The best worship is that which is performed without hope of achieving any goal. The worst is that which has a specific goal in mind. He who worships the Supreme Being must contemplate him in every creation and every creature within it. Agni Purana. The most destructive form of unbelief is not that a person does not believe, but that a person professes what he does not believe. Martino. Yet faith in love is not only clearer, more definite, and more intelligible than every faith devised by human beings. Not only does it alone unite people while the others divide them, it has another advantage over every other faith. It is also the most certain. No matter how convinced a person may be of the truth of his faith, it is difficult for him not to doubt it when he learns that other people are just as certain of the truth of their own beliefs and regard his faith as false. Only for a person who recognizes love, the one object of faith common to all people, can there be no doubt whatsoever regarding the truth of his faith. For every religious faith is, in the end, only the acknowledgement of a principle that the mind cannot fully comprehend, yet without which a human being cannot make sense either of life or of the world, and whose existence one must therefore trust. All religions acknowledge such a principle. It is Brahma, Jehovah, the Trinity, Allah, the Tao of the Taoists, the Dharma of the Buddhists, the substance of the materialists. Faith in the single commandment of love acknowledges this same principle of life as well, but with one essential difference. Whereas in Jewish, Brahmanic, Christian, Muslim, and other religions, this principle is called God and is more or less defined as a personal, omnipotent, eternal being, whose will and acts are known through miraculous revelations. In the faith of love, this principle, also called God, God as love, God is love, is known to all people not by human tradition, but by the direct and unceasing revelation of His love in every human soul, a revelation that is the same for all. That is why this faith is not only clearer and more definite than any faith or form of worship founded on human traditions that vary from people to people. It is also more beneficial to humanity, because it unites where other faiths divide. And it appears more certain as well, because it rests not on tradition but on the direct, ever-present awareness of God, which is the same in all people. V. God is incomprehensible to the human mind. We know only that He exists. Believe in God, serve Him, but do not strive to know Him. You will gain nothing for your efforts but confusion of thought. Do not even concern yourself with knowing whether He exists or not. Serve Him as if He were always and everywhere. Philemon. We come to know God's existence not so much through reason as through the awareness of our complete dependence on Him, much as an infant feels itself dependent in its mother's arms. The child does not know who holds him, warms him, or feeds him, yet he knows that there is someone there, and more than that, he loves the one in whose power he rests. So, it is with us. Do not be troubled by the fact that the concept of God is unclear to you. The simpler and clearer it is, the further it is from the truth, and the less reliable it is as a foundation. When I speak to you about God, do not think that I am speaking of some object made of gold or silver. The God of whom I speak, you feel Him in your soul. You carry Him within yourself, and through your impure thoughts and abominable deeds, you defile His image in your soul. Before the golden idol you worship as God, you are careful not to do anything indecent, yet in the presence of the God who is within you, who sees and hears everything, you do not even blush when you give in to your vile thoughts and deeds. If only we would constantly remember that God within us is a witness to everything we do and think, we would cease to sin, and God would dwell in us unceasingly. Let us then remember God, think of Him, and speak of Him as often as possible. Epictetus. Faith in the commandment of love and the worship that flows from it are clearer, more definite, more beneficial, and more certain than any other faith. One need only understand clearly what faith is and what the worship of God is. Faith in the commandment of love means this: we can know God only within ourselves, and only through the aspect in which he reveals himself to us. And he reveals himself to us as love. So although we know him only partially, only in the aspect by which he reveals himself, we nevertheless know beyond doubt that he exists. We know the quality of his being that we perceive within ourselves, and we know what he asks of us. This faith has been expressed many times in all the religious teachings of the world, beginning with the most ancient Egyptian, Hindu, and even so-called pagan ones, and is expressed with particular clarity in the teaching of Christ. It is expressed in this way in the Gospel of Mark 12:28-31, and with particular clarity in the Gospel and Epistles of John. Just as the Father has life in himself, so also the Son has life in himself. Gospel of John 5:26. Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law, I said, you are gods?" Psalm 81:6. If he called those to whom the word of God came gods, and Scripture cannot be broken, do you say of him whom the Father has sanctified and sent into the world, "You are blaspheming, because I said, I am the Son of God"? If I am not doing the works of my Father, do not believe me, but if I am doing them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you may know and believe that the Father is in me, and I am in the Father. John 10:34-38. Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I speak to you I do not speak on my own. The Father who dwells in me, he is doing the works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. But if not, believe because of the works themselves. John 14:10-11. May they all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I am in you. So may they also be one in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. John 17:21. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us of his Spirit. And we have come to know the love that God has for us, and we have believed in it. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God in him. 1 John 4:12, 13, 16. Faith in love is the recognition that the fundamental principle of our life is a being incomprehensible to us, manifesting itself in us as love. 6. It is bad that people do not know God, but worst of all is that people recognize as God that which is not God. Lactantius. There are two kinds of faith. Faith in what people say, which is faith in persons, and comes in many forms, and faith in one's dependence on the one who sent us into the world. That is faith in God, and for all people it is one and the same. A person's religion consists not of the many things in which he doubts and which he tries to believe, but of the few things in which he is certain, and in which faith requires no effort on his part. Carlyle. Faith in the single commandment means this: God lives within us and reveals himself in us through love. The worship belonging to this faith in the single commandment, like all worship, consists in doing what faith commands and refraining from what it forbids. But here, the difference is this: while other faiths, including church doctrine, require many acts and even more renunciations in order to please God, the worship of the one faith requires only one act, and abstinence from only one thing. Church doctrine, in order to please God, requires the sacraments: baptism, confirmation, confession, communion, marriage. It requires belief in the infallibility of certain books and certain persons. It requires attendance at church, the recitation of set prayers at set times, and the fulfillment of many other positive commandments. And there are even more negative ones. Besides abstaining from murder, theft, and fornication, one must refrain from worshipping other gods, from eating forbidden foods at certain times, and above all from desecrating things held to be sacred. And such sacred objects are countless. But the worship of God requires only one thing from every person: love. Love for God within oneself and for the God who lives in all others. To love God within oneself means to strive toward the highest perfection of love. To love God in others means to recognize in every person the same God who lives in me, and therefore to do for every person not what I myself desire, but what God, who lives in all, desires. In this lies the whole commandment of what a person is to do according to faith in the one commandment. There is likewise only one prohibition in this faith: do not violate reverence for God, who lives in me and in every human being. Not to violate reverence for God within oneself means remembering His presence there and cleansing from oneself whatever is incompatible with His presence in the soul. Not to violate reverence for God in others means not only doing no harm to one's neighbor, not insulting or humiliating anyone, whoever they may be, but honoring every person as the most sacred thing in the world. In essence, however, both the positive and negative commandments of the faith in love converge on one point: the recognition that God lives in man, and that therefore one must honor Him and not insult Him, neither within oneself nor in any human being whatsoever. This reverence for God has been expressed many times in all of humanity's religious and moral teachings, both positively, in loving God within oneself and in others, and negatively, in not offending Him within oneself or in others. Seventh, the foundation of every state religion is violence. The foundation of Christianity is love. The state is coercion. Christianity is persuasion. The sword and the shepherd's staff are opposites and cannot be allies. Kuningam gaike. It is impossible to weigh or measure the harm false faith has done, and still does. Faith determines a person's relation to God and to the world, and from that relation flows one's sense of purpose. What then must human life become if that relation, and the purpose drawn from it, are false? It is not enough to reject false faith, that is, a false relationship to the world. One must also establish the true one. People's misfortune and evil stem not so much from the fact that people do not know their duties, but rather from the fact that they regard as their duties things that are not actually their duties. Love for others brings true, inner, and inalienable good, because love unites a person with others and with God. A simple boy was persuaded that he was not the son of his honest, kind, loving mother, the mother who had nursed him and now feeds and clothes him, but the son of some wondrously beautiful and powerful enchantress who performs miracles of every kind and can grant him every blessing if only he will honor her and bow before her. And the boy believes this. He turns away from his mother, does not listen to her, does not make use of the good she gives him, but waits for great and extraordinary gifts from the imaginary sorceress. He not only believes the tales of her miracles, he invents miracles of his own and believes those too, though he has never seen any. And the longer it goes on, the more he believes in the sorceress, because once he has turned away from his mother, all his hope lies in her. So he keeps praying and begging for miracles, though he has never seen one. But time passes, no miracles come, and he begins to doubt the sorceress. Yet because he has turned away from his mother and forgotten her, he does not return to her love. Instead, he does the very opposite of what would please her. The same is true of the vast majority of people, those who believe in the miracles of some personal creator God whom no one has ever seen. No one has ever seen God, John 1:18. These people expect rich and abundant blessings from this imaginary God. They pray to him, put speeches and commandments into his mouth, and above all invent the strangest, most astonishing, and most useless miracles. And like that foolish boy, they neither know nor wish to know their simple and ever-present mother, who always lives with them, never ceases to love them, and can give them not imaginary, but real good. If only they would acknowledge her. This mother is the God of love, who gave us life and still gives it, and who alone can give us true and unshakable good. To believe in this mother, in this God of love, the only God accessible to human beings, no miracles are needed. To receive good from him, no petitions and no prayers are needed. One thing only is needed. Just as that boy must stop believing in trifles and deceptions and trust his mother, so must people trust what truly is and what alone can give us good, the God of love who dwells in every human soul. And if a person believes in this God of love, then the good for which every human being naturally longs will be open to him and cannot be taken away. It cannot be taken away because this good is gained not by any outward force, but only by one's own inward activity. Let a person give himself to the God of love, and he will surely receive the good that belongs to his soul. 8th, nothing hinders the spread of truth as much as the stubborn clinging to ancient traditions sanctified by time. Disrespect for tradition has caused not even 1/1000th of the harm produced by this respect for customs, laws, and institutions that have no reasonable justification in our time. There is nothing more unworthy of a rational being than to lament that what our fathers held to be true has turned out to be a lie. Is it not better to seek new foundations of unity to replace the old ones? Martino. There are people who take upon themselves the right to decide for others what their relation to God and the world should be. And there are other people, the overwhelming majority, who hand that right over to them and blindly believe whatever they are told. It is often astonishing to see how people can believe such strange, foolish, and absurd legends about Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and even more foolish and needless miracles, the feeding of the multitudes, the ascension, the resurrection, healings wrought by icons, the atonement of sins, faith in sacraments, and equally absurd Hindu, Buddhist, and other traditions. Most astonishing of all is that sensible and intelligent people so often believe all this, making enormous efforts of mind to justify and explain assumptions that are plainly unnecessary and impossible. Why is this so? Because people have lost faith, or rather, lost not faith, but the living awareness of their spiritual bond with the God of love, and they lost it because false beliefs were planted in them. Having lost that awareness, they needed something to replace it. And so, to replace their lost awareness of connection with the infinite, they were inevitably driven to invent a God whose existence could explain their connection to the world. But in order to force themselves and others to believe in such a strange God, one at odds with the very idea of God as beyond space and time, beyond the grasp of mind and word, they had to imagine him as exceptional, exalted above all people, performing acts inaccessible to human beings, miracles. And the more miracles there were, the stronger faith was supposed to be. More than that, when people no longer possessed that unquestionable awareness of connection with the source of all things, which faith in love gives, they needed miracles from this God. And to reinforce belief in this miracle-working God, threats and punishments for unbelief were also required. To believe in such a God, one had to believe in the miracles he performed. And to believe in those miracles, one had to believe in the God who commanded belief in them. This false circle could not endure for long. Faith in a personal God and in the miracles ascribed to him was more and more destroyed. And as that faith crumbled, the one object of faith proper to human beings became ever clearer: love, which called and still calls people to itself, just as a loving mother never ceases to call back the child that has turned away from her. Ninth, the diversity of religions. What a strange expression. There may, of course, be different beliefs about historical events used not in religion itself but in religious history, and belonging to the sphere of scholarship. And there may likewise be different sacred books, the Zendavesta, the Vedas, the Quran, and so on. But there can be only one religion that is valid for all times. All these differing beliefs can contain nothing more than auxiliary means in relation to religion, incidental forms that vary according to time and place. Kant. X. True good is always within our grasp. It follows a good life like a shadow. There are few true goods. The only true good and virtue is that which is good and virtuous for all. Therefore, in order not to deviate from the chosen goal, it is necessary that this goal be a good in accordance with the common good. Whoever directs their actions towards such a goal will acquire good for themselves. Marcus Aurelius. The son of Caesar from Talomo came to the Buddha and began to complain. "Teacher," he said, "every priest and monk praises his own faith, saying that it alone is true, and curses the faith of others, calling it false. Doubts torment me, and I do not know whose words I should heed." The Buddha replied, "Your doubts are well-founded, son of Caesar. Listen to my instruction. Do not believe anything based on hearsay. Do not believe in traditions, for they have passed through many generations before reaching us. Do not believe anything based on rumors or because people talk about it a lot. Do not believe merely because you are shown the teachings of some ancient sage. Do not believe anything simply because it is to your advantage, or because long-standing custom leads you to accept it as true. Do not believe anything based solely on the authority of your teachers or the clergy. Only that which agrees with your experience and your own investigation, accords with reason, and leads to the welfare and happiness of yourself and all living beings. Only that should you accept as true and live by. Anguttara Nikaya. Yes, let people believe, only let them believe in this one commandment as they now believe in so many so-called divine doctrines, in the Trinity, in Christ the Redeemer, in the Virgin Mary, in Krishna, Moses, and Buddha. in books declared sacred and therefore said to contain indisputable truth, in miracles no one has seen, in sacraments and prayers whose power no one knows and no one can know. Let them believe, even if only approximately, in that one commandment which God has given to all people and written in every human heart, and in that one eternal, unceasing miracle of God's presence in the human soul. And let them practice the worship that flows from such faith, even if only approximately as they now practice church worship, its sacraments, rites, private prayers, and public prayers. Then, how quickly would people forget the horrors they now inflict on one another, and how naturally, without outward upheaval, there would emerge, especially among the peoples of the Christian world, that just life proper to our age, which people now try to achieve by acts of violence and cruelty most contrary to love. But is that even possible? Ask instead, is it possible that this should not be so? Is it possible that things should remain as they are now? Is it possible that people, the majority of people, while acknowledging faith in the God of love as the highest divine law, and while feeling in their hearts the ceaseless manifestation of this God, should go on professing a strange heap of utterly useless imaginary revelations, and instead of the one worship that follows from faith in the God of love, active love of God and neighbor, should go on making futile attempts to improve their condition by the very means that made it what it is? And how little is needed for all that to be accomplished, the very thing whose absence causes people such agonizing suffering. Only one thing is needed: faith, but true faith, not in people, but in God. We need only stop believing people and begin believing God, not the revelations about God written in books, but the God who lives in our souls and never ceases to tell us who He is, who we are, and how we must live according to His will. Let people believe in the necessity of fulfilling the one commandment of love as firmly as they now believe in the necessity of performing this or that sacrament or prayer. Let them believe, as they now believe in the sanctity of scriptures, temples, images, and chalices, that there is in the world only one indisputable sanctuary, the human being. Let them believe that the one thing which can never and must never be desecrated or insulted is the human being, the bearer of the divine principle. Then not only executions and wars, but every form of violence of one person against another would become impossible. If only people were raised from childhood to recognize God in the human person as the one true sanctuary, and love and reverence for Him as the one true worship, no one would dare to desecrate God either in himself or in his brother, by separating from him in enmity and committing violence against him. Tell a Buddhist, a Muslim, or a church-going Christian to desecrate the lifeless objects he considers sacred, and he would sooner endure every hardship, sooner let himself be killed, than desecrate what he holds holy. The same would be true of a Christian brought up in a truly Christian way in relation to every human being. Such a person, for no advantage whatever, under no threat of punishment, not even death, would commit acts contrary to the one commandment of love. He would not desecrate or insult God either in himself or in his neighbor, and still less would he lay hands on what those who believe in the commandment of love regard as the highest and only sacred thing, another human life. And so there could be no person who believed in the one commandment who would be an executioner, a king, a soldier, a judge, a jailer, a landowner, a tax collector, a capitalist, or any direct or indirect participant in acts contrary to love, acts that defile, insult, destroy, and extinguish human life. And if people, more and more of them, refuse to commit such acts and refuse to share in them, then there would naturally arise, I do not say the kingdom of God, for the full realization of what human beings cannot help striving for will never be established while life remains in them. But there would certainly arise a form of life in which it would be shameful to rule and shameful to submit voluntarily to the rule of one person over another. It would be shameful to be rich. It would be shameful to own land. It would be shameful not only to wage war, but even to regard people of other nations as enemies, and people would possess a clear awareness of what they must not do. Then the brutal life we live now, repellent alike to reason and to feeling, could no longer continue, and we would draw nearer, inevitably and without ceasing, to that one reasonable and good life that alone is worthy of the people of our time. Addendum. An ideal is a guiding star. Without it, there is no clear direction, and without direction, there is no movement, no life. An ideal is an ideal only when its realization is possible only in an idea, in thought, when it appears attainable only in infinity, and when, therefore, the possibility of approaching it is infinite. But even if we admit that the commandment of love is God's one commandment, the fulfillment of this commandment in the sense required by the gospel is impossible for a human being, say those who profess the many beliefs and commandments established by the Church. To fulfill the commandment of love completely, as the gospel demands, one must hate one's family and leave them. One must not resist evil by violence. One must become poor. One must renounce oneself and one's own life. And no human being can do this. Therefore, while not rejecting the commandment of love, and while fulfilling it within certain limits, we seek to please God by fulfilling His other commandments. In this way, we make the commandment of love easier for ourselves, and at the same time preserve hope of forgiveness for our incomplete fulfillment of God's law in this life. This is what the adherents of church doctrine say. But this argument, that the full fulfillment of the commandment of love is impossible because it requires renouncing one's life, and that therefore other, more manageable commandments must be acknowledged in order to please God, is not only wholly false, but deliberately deceptive. Christian teaching neither does nor can demand the impossible of a human being, namely, the complete renunciation of bodily life. It shows people only the highest ideal toward which they are naturally called to strive. The fulfillment of the commandment does not lie in fully satisfying all the demands of love, which is impossible in this life, but in drawing ever nearer to that ideal through an ever-increasing growth of love within oneself and an ever greater renunciation of self. Thus, the treating of an unattainable ideal as though it were a literally fulfillable commandment is only a device, meant to prove that since the commandment of love cannot be fulfilled in its perfect fullness in this life, it cannot be the sole commandment, and that there must therefore be other commandments by whose fulfillment one may please God. To say that the commandment of love cannot be fulfilled because it points toward an unattainable ideal, and therefore to allow departures from the demands of love, and to replace the fulfillment of love with other commandments. This is like a traveler with a compass deciding that the straight course shown to him is impossible, because mountains and rivers lie in the way, and therefore abandoning the shortest and truest direction in order to be guided by other considerations having nothing to do with the compass. The same is true of the argument that, because a person cannot attain the full fulfillment of the commandment of love, which includes complete self-renunciation, he must acknowledge other divine commandments whose fulfillment partly takes the place of fulfilling the commandment of love. It is not true. It is a deception that ruins human life by turning people away from true life. The fulfillment of the commandment of love, which consists in training oneself more and more to live a life of love in deed, word, and thought, is not only possible. Only such a life gives a person enduring freedom and unceasing good. July 15th, 1909. Yasnaya Polyana.